On this Friday night, manhunt over.
Ryan Wedding tormented several people and several families that will never be the same.
How the former Canadian Olympian turned fugitive is back behind bars. A polar vortex warning for millions of Canadians.
We should get warmer already.
Where another brutal blast of winter weather is headed. Boosting Arctic security, what Greenland says it's capable of. Plus beefing up in the extreme cold.
If you see the frost on the backs of the cows here, that's actually a good sign.
One farmer's goal to keep his cows comfy.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Colleen Christie.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Former Canadian Olympic snowboarder and alleged drug kingpin Ryan Wedding is now behind bars in the U.S. The BC man had been at the top of the FBI's most wanted list, accused of running a multinational drug operation and masterminding a string of murders.
And just to tell you how bad of a guy Ryan Wedding is, he went from an Olympic snowboarder to the largest narco trafficker in modern times. He's a modern-day El Chapo. He is a modern-day Pablo Escobar. And he thought he could evade justice.
Wedding was arrested in Mexico, where he was believed to be in hiding for more than a decade, working with the notorious Sinaloa drug cartel. Touria Izri has our top story.
This California tarmac marks the end of the line for Canadian Ryan Wedding and the conclusion of an international manhunt. The alleged cocaine kingpin was flown to the U.S. from Mexico and led away in handcuffs by FBI agents.
To find a guy who's been on the lam for multiple years for some of the most egregious crimes on planet Earth takes an interagency-wide effort.
U.S. and Canadian authorities announced the arrest of one of North America's most notorious fugitives, who spent 10 years on the run.
We can proudly say that our communities, our countries are much safer with the arrest of Ryan Wedding.
FBI Director Kash Patel offered few details about the arrest or whether anyone received the $15 million reward for information leading to his capture.
To safeguard the integrity of the ongoing investigation, we will not go into that.
A Mexican official posted photos on social media from a meeting with Patel, saying the FBI director left the country, taking with him a Canadian citizen who voluntarily surrendered yesterday at the U.S. Embassy. 36 members of Wedding's alleged criminal network have also been arrested. In the course of the police investigation, officers seized a $15 million Mercedes, $40 million worth of motorcycles, valuable art and jewelry, and a mountain of drugs.
Our collective efforts led to the seizure of more than 2,300 kilograms of cocaine.
He's also accused of ordering the murder of a Canadian informant in Medellin, Colombia, who was set to testify against him.
Ryan Wedding tormented several people and several families that will never be the same. But today, they get the justice that they sought.
Before his arrest, Wedding had not been seen publicly since 2024. On Monday, he's expected to surface again in a Los Angeles courtroom, where he'll face a long list of charges, including murder. Touria Izri, Global News, Montreal.
Millions of Canadians are bundling up tonight as a powerful Arctic air mass tightens its grip on much of the country. Environment Canada has issued yellow and orange weather warnings from Alberta all the way to the Maritimes and Labrador. In some areas, wind chills are expected to make it feel like minus 50 degrees. Mike Armstrong looks at the impact on Canadians.
This is the sort of weather where if you can stay inside, you do. But in Saskatoon at minus 38 with the wind chill, if you have to go out, complaints are forgivable.
I get cold really fast and really easy, so I hate the cold. We should get warmer already.
Well, the extreme cold is spreading. A polar vortex is moving air from the north down and eastward. Environment Canada says this is a multi-day cold event with conditions cold enough to pose serious health risks.
Freezing. But our boss is giving us warm breaks so every hour, so we're good.
Quebec and Ontario are looking at plummeting temperatures in the coming hours. Municipalities are opening spaces in shelters and warming centers for people living outside.
All hands on deck, police, firefighters, community organizations, making sure that we're going around and making sure nobody will be left on the street.
Now, the cold is going to be tough on utilities as it drives up demand for electricity. Hydro-Quebec is asking the public to cut back on consumption.
What we're seeing is with the cold, we're most likely are going to have the highest demand of the year on this Sunday.
In the U.S., about 2/3 of Americans are dealing with winter weather warnings. At least 14 states have declared a state of emergency, preparing for heavy snow and mobilizing resources.
So our forecasts have been upgraded or downgraded, depending on your perspective. We're expecting more snow than they were talking about even 24 hours ago.
Stores are doing brisk business as millions stock up.
Hopefully we'll get there before the storm.
Thousands of flights have already been canceled, and officials say they expect over the weekend to close some airports altogether. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
And Global News meteorologist Anthony Farnell joins us now. Anthony, what more can you tell us about this weekend's bitter conditions and how long they'll last?
Good evening, Colleen. It's that temperature-wind combination that's leading to some rather extreme conditions, all because of the polar vortex. You see it here. It kind of looks like a black hole. It's right over Hudson Bay, but the effects are being felt across much of Canada, and it lingers right through next week. Below seasonal, not quite as extreme. Finally, by the end of the month, that polar vortex reforms up over the North Pole with some moderating temperatures for most of us. But until then, minus 30 to minus 45 wind chills, and now it's expanding from the prairies to Ontario and Quebec. In fact, from Alberta all the way to Newfoundland, we have extreme cold warnings. And south of the border, there's a new storm developing, an ice storm in Texas, all the way towards the southeastern United States. And then we have heavy snow just to the north, and that's going to brush Toronto on Sunday, Montreal and Atlantic Canada into early next week. Heavy amounts, generally anywhere from 15 to well over 30 centimeters of snow, and you can see that swath right here. This storm is going to be around for several more days. Colleen?
All right, thanks for that, Anthony. On day 2 of the Liberal cabinet retreat, ministers gathered to talk about domestic issues. Still, U.S. President Donald Trump and his administration dominated the conversation once again. But the Prime Minister didn't weigh in publicly. Gillian Piper joins us after the Prime Minister's speedy exit from the retreat. Gillian.
I'm here in Quebec City, Colleen, where the Prime Minister was supposed to give closing remarks to wrap his cabinet strategy session. Instead, he left early without answering any questions. The finance minister was forced to close the strategy session after a tumultuous week between Canada and the White House. François-Philippe Champagne says the Prime Minister's abrupt departure was due to a scheduling issue and would not offer more details even when pressed.
I can't answer questions about it.
Sorry, sir, I could not hear.
Can you answer questions about it?
Listen.
More about Trump's comments about NATO forces?
No, I'm happy.
Incredibly insulting. Or Scott Bessett's comments about Alberta separatism?
I'm happy if you want to take the mic, and I'll be more than happy to answer your questions.
That exchange just hours after the Trump administration once again weighed into Canada's sovereignty.
People want sovereignty. They want what the U.S. has got.
With new pointed comments from the U.S. Treasury Secretary on a potential Alberta separation referendum. Champagne giving a muted response.
One thing I've learned over time is that you don't need to comment on every single comment that are being made.
Bessen's comments come just days after Carney critiqued Trump's protectionist policies in Switzerland and signed a new trade deal with China in an effort to diversify away from the U.S., something the president warns won't end well. Canada is against the Golden Dome missile defense project, Trump said. Instead, they voted in favor of doing business with China, who will eat them up within the first year. Trump also lashing out at other NATO allies by downplaying their contributions when the U.S. invoked Article 5 after 9/11, prompting all country members to serve at their request.
We've never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. You know, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little off the front lines.
158 Canadians died in Afghanistan, but the Veterans Affairs and Defense Ministers both ducked questions on Trump's comments, a stark contrast to international backlash.
So I consider President Trump's remarks to be insulting and frankly appalling.
Carney's quick departure leaves Canadians with unanswered questions during a time of heightened Canada-US tensions, which could impact free trade negotiations that were supposed to start in mid-January, Colleen. But so far, no cabinet ministers have headed to Washington to begin those discussions.
Gillian Piper in Quebec City. Thanks, Gillian. Today, Denmark's prime minister traveled to Greenland's capital, where there's still a lot of confusion about U.S. President Donald Trump's supposed deal on Greenland and what the path forward looks like. Heidi Petronchik reports from Nook. Heidi.
Colleen, after weeks of intense annexation threats by the U.S. president, there now seem to be behind-the-scenes conversations trying to smooth all this out. But those involved are keeping whatever details they may have under wraps. Greenlanders welcomed the Danish Prime Minister with patriotic display. And a throng of international journalists followed as Mette Frederiksen met with Greenlandic Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen. Neither said much about the week's events and the U.S. president's claim of a deal for total and permanent American access to the autonomous island territory in the Danish kingdom. We are in a serious situation, as everyone can see, said Frederiksen. There is now a diplomatic, political track that we will be following together. Earlier Friday, Frederiksen met with NATO's Secretary General, who then wrote on social media he's working with Denmark to enhance defense in the Arctic. According to Denmark's foreign minister, diplomats from Denmark and the U.S. met in Washington Thursday to establish a path forward. The American president can at least see the perspective for the time being. He said that instead of these violent ideas, he now wants to negotiate a solution.
What I can say with very high certainty, there's no deal.
Jacob Karsbo is former Danish Defense Intelligence and says enhanced Arctic security is already possible within NATO. Danish troops making the point in a video shared Friday by Danish Defense of military exercises on Greenland this week.
We have a defense agreement that really allows the U.S. to do a whole lot in Greenland if need be.
After high emotions the past few weeks, Denmark's defense minister has urged calm, a plea to take down the temperature after such intense political turmoil. Political leaders in Denmark and Greenland have urged the need for respectful dialogue, but the U.S. president has now inflamed NATO veterans, including those in Denmark, by suggesting they stayed off the front lines in Afghanistan, creating more drama between the U.S. and its NATO allies. Colleen.
Heidi Petronchik in Nook, Greenland. Thanks, Heidi. Facing down ice in freezing temperatures. Coming up, dozens of clergy arrested at a Minneapolis protest.
So we pray that ICE will return home and take off their masks and embrace the joy and love of community that is waiting for them. They do not have to be here terrorizing our children.
Demonstrators braving frigid temperatures at several ice-out protests around Minnesota, all demanding an end to the aggressive campaign of immigration sweeps. Dozens of faith leaders were arrested at one protest at Minneapolis St. Paul International Airport, with police saying the gathering was restricting public access. Protesters say some 2,000 deportees have been moved through that airport. An autopsy has revealed how a Canadian teenager died in Australia earlier this week. 19-year-old Piper James from Campbell River, BC, was found dead surrounded by dingoes on a beach on Garry, an island off the country's east coast. A preliminary autopsy found drowning was the most likely cause of death, and that dingo bite marks on her body most likely occurred after she died. James had told friends she was going for an early morning swim. A report from New Brunswick Chief Medical Officer has found no evidence of a mysterious brain disease that has seen hundreds of residents across the province report symptoms. The report from Dr. Yves Leger looked into 222 files of the 400 that reported symptoms of what the province's health department called a neurological syndrome of unknown cause. The review analyzed test results from patients for a number of herbicides and metals to see whether they might be contributing to their neurological illness. Leger says their findings do not suggest exposure to any environmental substances as a potential cause.
When we looked at the findings from the herbicides tested, we found that around 95% of the results received were within the normal or expected range when compared to the lab's reference ranges. When we compared the levels of this patient group to levels we would expect to see if we tested a group of Atlantic Canadians, the overall results were very similar.
The Public Health Agency of Canada will conduct a separate review of the investigation. Ahead, Ukrainian resilience during what might be the worst winter of the war. In the Middle East, representatives from the U.S., Ukraine and Russia are in Abu Dhabi for the first trilateral talks since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine nearly 4 years ago. The discussions mark the latest development in the U.S.-led effort to secure a peace deal and are expected to continue into Saturday. They're happening a day after U.S. President Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner met with Russian President Vladimir Putin again in Moscow. Russia's demand to keep territory it has seized in Ukraine remains a major sticking point in negotiations. Through it all, Ukrainians are coping with bitterly cold temperatures right now, and many of them are doing it with no electricity, water, or heating as Russian airstrikes continue to pound the country's power network. Redmond Shannon reports.
People in Kyiv prepare for another day to be endured, outside and inside. Military chaplain Anton Rybakov says when you have no heat or power, everything else becomes secondary. He says this is the hardest winter yet of the war. Russia's incessant airstrikes have meant long power cuts for most of Kyiv's residents over the past week. Anton improvises a radiator using a gas stove and this large pot of water. Others take refuge in any place that's warm. Mikhailo says it drops to as low as 5 degrees inside his home.
We are very afraid of the upcoming night and the potential Russian attack. They know that we are hanging by a thread.
Ukrainian MP Kira Rudik spoke with Global News using a battery-powered lamp, laptop and phone signal.
This humanitarian catastrophe is happening and the world is watching.
Most of Ukraine's non-nuclear power plants have been hit by Russian strikes. This repair worker says there is a lot of damage that is repeated over and over again. As soon as we restore power, he says, the attacks resume. Most of the outages are concentrated in cities, where the vulnerable come in all shapes and sizes. Kyiv zoo staff work around the clock to keep many of the animals alive. The zoo's boss says these animals don't have the option to flee to the countryside. As night draws in again, Ukrainians charge up before hunkering down. We will continue living. They won't break us, says this woman. Russian President Vladimir Putin is clearly betting otherwise. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Here at home, keeping cows cozy and healthy in winter. Next. The extreme cold blanketing much of the country also threatens the health and comfort of livestock. Marty Blunt reports on the lengths farmers go to keep their herds safe and warm.
It's the morning commute for Trevor Sund.
They'll find a bluff of trees and an opening where the wind is right.
Checking on and caring for his cattle on a bitterly cold Manitoba morning.
Minus 40, it's nothing too new.
A hardy herd covered in frost and hiding among the poplar trees, avoiding wind chills in the minus 40s.
If you see the frost on the backs of the cows here, that's actually a good sign. It doesn't mean they're cold, it means the heat is not getting out through their hair. If that was to melt, they'd get wet and then they'd get sick.
Sund says these beefy animals are built tough and healthy cows can withstand the extreme cold. But extra precautions need to be taken.
They require more feed. Just add more straw so they can bed in if you find a spot, or let them find a nice bluff of trees where they hide in and get out of the wind at least.
Something that can prove challenging following a drought-stricken year.
This year, with it being a drought, my first cut hay was abysmal. So luckily we had half of them left over from the year before. So we're good this year.
Extra feed, shelter from the wind, dry bedding, and access to water is key. And veterinarians say without that, the impacts could be devastating.
If cattle aren't having the appropriate bedding, nutrition, protection from the wind, water, in extreme conditions, they could become hypothermic and die. That's that's the worst case scenario.
As for Sund, it's a tough job magnified by tough temperatures.
It's one of those things that, yeah, you hate doing it, but once you get out here, it's fine. You know, if you're used to the cold, you're used to the cold.
But would he trade it for an indoor job?
Oh, heck no. No, I've worked in buildings and stuff, and makes you soft.
Marnie Blunt, Global News, Woodlands, Manitoba.
Stay warm out there. That's Global National for this Friday night. I'm Colleen Christie. Tonight's Your Canada is this illuminated maple leaf in Sudbury, Ontario. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Have a great night.